But we're not stopping reporting on what's going on in Washington, D.C., despite the fact that the House of Representatives has adjourned for the holiday. But we wanted to catch up with Congressman John Rose, who is well serving the state in Washington, and he joins us now to talk about recent activity and his thoughts about all of it. Congressman Rose, first and foremost, a very Merry Christmas and a happy holidays to you and your family. How are you, sir?
I am well, Matt. Thanks for having me on the show today, and Merry Christmas to you and your family and all of our listeners.
Well, I appreciate you making time for us. I know that you had a lot of activities, a lot of home activities as you're back from D.C., and so I appreciate you spending a bit of time with us. Let's get into the NDAA. I had Congressman Scott DesJarlais on last week, and I told Scott I consider him a friend. I think he's a good representative, and he's a good conservative, and I strongly disagreed with his vote on this NDAA. I do not believe Republicans received enough concessions. We had a spirited conversation about it. We left the conversation as friends, but it was relatively contentious, and I imagine that that's reflective of what some on Capitol Hill were debating previewing the vote. You were a no vote on this. Tell us why you were. I believe you're a no vote, John. Tell us why you were a no vote and what caused you to go the direction that you did.
Sure. Well, let me begin by saying that Scott DesJarlais is a principled conservative, and I consider him to be a great friend and colleague. And I know that wasn't an easy vote for him, but I understand that. He had to make some tough choices. We all did. So for me, this really boiled down the kind of the straw that broke the camel's back here, and it's not a straw at all because it's a very significant issue, is the clean extension of Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act through April 19th of the coming year. And I just felt like that was a bridge too far. I had joined with over 50 of my fellow members on a bipartisan basis asking that the FISA 702 extension not be put onto the NDAA, that it be put alone by itself, and we could see how it would stand. And so that was really the thing that was my major objection. I was disappointed about the failure to include many of the other conservative policy writers that we had successfully gotten through on the House NDAA that I voted for back in July, along with the significant 5.2% pay raise for our enlisted men and women. And, so there were lots of things that were good about the NDAA, even the conference report that came to us, the compromise between the House and Senate versions, still lots of good things there, but just not as much as we needed in order to justify a yes vote, in my view.
One of the things that those that voted in favor of it, they were able to overcome the 702 ramifications. And Scott mentioned this last week, that it's only a 4 or so month, I guess January, February, March, April, a 4-month extension, and we'll have an opportunity to take another bite at that apple come April. Do you agree with that? And what do you expect will happen in April when this comes up for a further extension, John?
Well, the hope is that we have, reform legislation. I'm not sure it's going to be good enough for me, to be honest with you, and I'm glad to talk more about that. But the hope is that, Republican efforts in the House lead to the badly needed reforms to protect the rights of U.S. citizens from the abuses that we've seen already occur. These are not things we have to speculate about. These things have already happened, as you know, and I know you've talked about this on your show. But Section 702 authority has been badly misused by the FBI, and to date, no one has been held accountable for that. None of the FISA judges, none of the FBI agents or other national security operatives that have misused FISA 702 authority have been held accountable, and I just don't think that we should give them that blank check to use when it's clear that they have abused it. And I'm not confident even that the reforms that have currently been put forward are going to be adequate to protect the American people. And while I understand that there are some foreign intelligence gathering, intelligence gathering advantages that Section 702 gives to our folks, to our, law enforcement and national intelligence folks, the price that we're being asked to pay, in terms of the intrusion into the privacy rights of the American people, I think are just too high.
Well, if they will spy on a presidential candidate, they'll spy on you, John. If they will, right? I mean, and it is not, and we were having this conversation earlier today with Tim Burchett, another of your colleagues, and I think it warrants a further conversation with you, that it's not as if there are just several Americans as standalones that got caught up in spying because the target was a foreign agent. In some cases, it has been accused of the FISA, the organization, the Department of Justice, that they used the FISA specifically to spy on Americans by using those foreign entanglements as an excuse to do so. So, I mean, it is a working around the spirit of the law and using loopholes within the law to spy on American people.
You're exactly right. And indiscriminately using the data that's been gathered to go, frankly, on fishing expeditions to try to ensnare, normal Americans who, for whatever reason, might have had the occasion where they've had to talk to somebody outside the country. And then, so this is what they were doing. And of course, we just can't have that. We should require that law enforcement officials that are pursuing American citizens go through the normal process of demonstrating, reasonable suspicion and the other requirements that are required to get a warrant to intrude into their privacy. And we have seen the abuse that's happening, and it's and no ramifications, no punishment for the officers or the officials, the FBI agents and management at the FBI, frankly, that have allowed this to happen.
John Rose with us, obviously congressman from the great state of Tennessee, joining us while they are on break in the House of Representatives. Leaving Washington, D.C. and getting back to Tennessee is always a good thing, but I so appreciate you spending a few moments with us covering some of the matters that were hot and heavy. Do you have – Mike Johnson was handed just a ton of weight to carry into the new year, 2024. Are you comfortable with his leadership so far?
I am. It is as you've already foreshadowed, it's a very difficult position that he's been put in. We have a razor-thin majority. We have some very strongly held feelings, across the Republican conference that he's trying to navigate and satisfy, and so it is a very difficult job. I am a bit disturbed and disappointed that we left town with so much work undone. And I fear that we're going to find ourselves right back in the same position that we found ourselves in September when we come back in January. We have 2 weeks before the first cliff, with the January 19th deadline for continuing funding. And I think to his credit, Speaker Johnson has vowed that we will not do any more temporary continuing resolutions. But that doesn't leave a lot of time to deal with those challenges. And frankly, as we've seen, the Senate has not taken us seriously on the House side. They've failed to get their work done. And so we're going to come back into that environment. And as everyone, I think, knows at this point, 2 weeks is not a lot of time when you start talking about reaching a compromise, getting language together, and being able to pass these things and avoid a government shutdown.
Congressman, you posted on your X Machine feed. That's what I'm calling it. I'm calling it the X Machine now, John. I like it. I don't know if anybody else does, but on your feed, President Biden's open border policies continue to put our national security at risk. Don't take my word for it. Just look at the numbers, and you list some of these incredible numbers that have existed and do exist because of the Biden administration. Almost 2.5 million illegal alien encounters, over 600,000 known gotaways, well in excess of 100, I think 160 or so, maybe even 170 of those that have been found to be on the terrorist watch list that have been caught. I mean, our nation's national security is at great risk, particularly in this heightened sensitivity with the Israeli-Hamas conflict ongoing. What, if anything, can we get done prior to the next presidential election, considering the pushback that you get from the Senate and the pushback you get from the White House?
Well, my hope is that the leverage that we have right now vis-a-vis funding of supplemental aid to Israel and to the Ukraine is going to provide that leverage. And thankfully we've seen that Leader McConnell has joined hands now in calling for these kinds of concessions from the administration. But I don't want to give anyone false hope. It's going to be difficult. The president and his party, the Democratic Party, are absolutely committed to this open border policy. They see an advantage for them politically in letting, now, in the short space of 3 years of letting 6.5 million people come into the country illegally. I think everyone listening knows how damaging that is to this country. And those 6.5 million people are living in the shadows. They're unable to fully engage in the economy. And ultimately, we're going to hear the same call that we always do of some sort of amnesty for all of these folks that have come in. And that's what the Democrats are counting on. They think this is 6.2 million votes for them that they've let into the country. And they are just ignoring the tremendous social damage that this does to our country and the human suffering that's caused by the trafficking of these individuals and the abuse that these folks suffer. Not to mention the associated problems that we see with fentanyl coming into the country and the funding of the criminal gangs at our southern border. All of these things are having horrendous impacts, and this president's just turning a blind eye to it. So this is why elections matter. We have simply got to reelect the 45th president next fall and bring order to our southern border again.
In the final couple of minutes that we have, John, I want to ask you about matters that relate to impeachment. Last week, you saw Representative Eric Swalwell and other members of Congress flaunt a duly issued subpoena to Hunter Biden by the House of Representatives. And it was just a shame that we saw it play out the way that we did. I was frustrated, and I'm not asking you to speak ill of James Comer or Jim Jordan or anyone else in the House of Representatives on your side of the aisle, John, but I was a little frustrated that they did not seem to have a battle plan in the event that he refused the subpoena. He shows up, pulls the press conference card, says that he will testify publicly, and I think he's leaning on the fact that he knows that the average American, they don't understand the difference between public testimony and private testimony and how much deeper you can go in a private deposition as opposed to public testimony. And because of that, they maybe win the political moment. Were you in control, or were you to see it done over again? Any advice as to how it could have been done better in order to get the information that's necessary to see if the president's entangled with any of these foreign business dealings?
Well, I understand the frustration, and I share that frustration. But I think this is the cross we bear as Republicans, because we play by the rules. And we use we're using the powers of Congress as they were meant to be used, and following the evidence and not just rushing out into what would be, at this juncture, still a politically driven impeachment proceeding against the president. Impeachment is correctly supposed to be a high bar. And so, we have been methodically pursuing, gathering the evidence, of course, against a great deal of pushback from the president, the administration, the mainstream media, who has shown a total disinterest in this issue. And so these things take time. And, we don't want to cut corners and then have our case be as weak as the Democrats saw when they tried to, pursue this erroneously against the former president. And so it's frustrating to watch. And I would just say to the listeners, you see here the typical ploys that Democrats pursue. And should Swalwell and the others who facilitated a press conference, I believe, that shouldn't have happened on Capitol grounds for someone who is flaunting the correct process, should they be punished in some way? Perhaps so. Will they respond to that? I don't know. Again, this process is frustrating, and we just always have to keep in mind that the founders wanted Congress to be a very difficult and kind of arduous process to pursue, because they didn't trust government. And we've seen how Democrats misuse that power at times. And then, frankly, that becomes an issue that has to be settled by the voters at the ballot box. And they should take note that the Democrats, they pursued President Trump, and they didn't mind that there wasn't an official vote, and they didn't mind that they didn't have the grounds that historically would have been called for. We shouldn't fall victim to getting lured into doing the same things that they did that would cut short the effectiveness of this. We have to meet a high bar to impeach the president. I happen to believe that a lot of that has already been demonstrated in terms of the president, clearly changing the policy positions that he had and using the leverage that he had as the vice president to affect policy changes for this country, for which his family and he were receiving a financial benefit. And, but we've only, I think, scratched the surface. And we also know, as was the case in previous situations like this, that the cover-up is a big part of the problem. And we've already exposed through the whistleblowers that have come forward that clearly the president's people have been using their power to deter the investigation and to push back against seeing the facts uncovered. And so this, unanimous vote by Republicans last week to move forward with an impeachment inquiry removes any question about the authority of Congress to gather the information that we need. And we've just now got to see that process move forward. I think you'll see Hunter Biden held in contempt of Congress unless he equivocates and comes back in and does the depositions that he's been subpoenaed to do. And I think he'll probably ultimately do that. Some people ask, well, why is he resisting? He's resisting to delay, and he's also resisting because once he's under oath in these depositions, then we will be able to use the facts that are available to demonstrate whether or not he's telling the truth. And as we've seen with Hunter Biden in the past, he and the truth have a very loose relationship. And so I think we can count on him misstepping there, despite the fact that he ought to see this coming.
Well spoken, John. Thank you. I go back and forth. I get frustrated with, you mentioned playing by the rules, and it can be a source of frustration, but I don't think you beat them by being them. And so I have respect for that analysis. And I appreciate you coming on today, and I appreciate everything that you've done for us for the year. And if I don't talk to you again, have a wonderful and Merry Christmas. Have a Happy New Year, and we'll continue the good fight in the new year. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Matt, and it's a great honor to represent the good people of Tennessee and the 6th District of Tennessee.